This is First Class Counselors, another innovative podcast brought to you by Camp Hacker. First Class Counselors is dedicated to young and up-and-coming camp mavericks. By equipping and empowering our on-the-ground staff, camp directors can rest easy knowing that our campers are having the true life-changing experience that parents expect. Find our show notes and our blog for camp leaders and professionals at camphacker.tv.
Welcome to First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper's summer the best it can be.
And whether you are brand new to the camp world or you have a few s'mores on your roasting stick, that self improvement and growth mindset are built into the DNA of every great staff member, or as we say here, every great first class counselor.
My name is Oliver Gregan. My pronouns are he, him. I am the Director of Camping Services for the YMCA Camp Westwood with the Pawtucket YMCA in Coventry, Rhode Island. We are a rebuilding day camp that plans to introduce an overnight camp in 2026.
And I'm Matt Wilfrid, pronouns are he, him. I'm the executive producer of podcasting and a consultant with Go Camp Pro.
Perfect. Well, today's topic is actually just part 2 of a topic that we've already started about being new to the camp job. You've just started in this industry, and there's just some things that we think you need to know when you're getting involved, right? These are for those first time counselors. And while it may have been a while since Matt and I had our first day as camp counselors, usually that memory sticks pretty good in the back of your head. So we began speaking about in part 1 being prepared, making sure you have your paperwork, prioritizing that schedule as you're applying for that job, knowing what's going to be happening that summer for you so you can really commit to what you're going to be doing at camp and why that's so important. These actions can take you and show your level of responsibility for your new employer, but also your reliability, how much they can depend on you. It's a great first impression a lot of the times. We are going to be diving into the expectations and the reality of you being a camp counselor. So as a new counselor, you know what is coming and how to handle it a little bit.
Yeah, and we want to remind folks who maybe are just listening in for the first couple episodes. So Oliver and I are both, Oliver is a camp director and I was a camp director for many years. And part of the reason we do this podcast is because we weren't given this information when we were counselors. We just I don't know about you, Oliver, but I was like, I was a camper for a long time. I know that wasn't your experience, but like I was just like, yeah, I want to work at camp. I think it's going to be fun. I want to be here with my friends. And if that's why you got into it, I mean that's not a bad reason to get into it, but we want to in this episode especially unpack kind of that second level of knowledge and also that second level of expectations. Because again, when I was a first year counselor, I was like, it's my job to keep these kids safe. Before I went through staff training, I was like, yeah, I'm taking care of kids. I've babysat before. I know kind of what the deal is, but this is a very high level of responsibility you have with kids, especially in the overnight camp setting, but still in the day camp setting. So we wanted to kind of break it down and unearth some of those things that we maybe wanted to hear ourselves when we were first and second year counselors.
Yeah, man, and you kind of transitioned pretty well because you talked about how like you knew that you had to keep the kids safe, right? That was the minimum requirement that you were thinking about. But like me coming outside of the camp world, I remember my first interview. I asked, "Hey, what could I have improved on in my interview?" And they said, "Well, you could have mentioned keeping the kids safe." And I was like, "Oh, that was a mistake. It is probably really important to keep the kids safe, but there's this kind of like
Yeah.
natural thought process that younger Oliver had of like, of course I'm going to keep the kids safe. Why do I have to even mention that I'm focused on that? But
Mm-hmm.
then when
Mm-hmm.
you really go through your staff training and you're taking care of the kids, and you know sometimes not even until that first incident, right, where safety becomes a pretty big concern, do you as a counselor go,
Yeah.
oh no, this is my job, I do have to keep these kids safe, right? Because until that
Yeah.
reality check kind of comes in, a lot of staff kind of go, yep, I get it, yep, don't let kids jump off of roofs, don't let kids not wear their harness improperly or whatever. I may have done a double negative there, but sure, kids wear their harness properly, right? You as a counselor don't really always register it until there's that big moment of a kid catches their sleeve on fire because they were reaching over the fire to grab a s'more from somebody, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I really do need to
Right.
think about fire safety when you had to quickly pat out someone's jacket that may have got an ember, a little extra on there. So that's one of those really important things.
Yeah, what you're saying there, Oliver, is like that there's more risk just in general. Like if you came to camp with babysitting experience, you're usually doing that either in a home that's been somewhat like child-proofed, and there's risks at home, right? Leaving the stove on or falling down the stairs. Those are certainly risks that you have to watch out for, but you are expected to be what camp directors would call a risk manager, right? Camp directors, they do big picture risk management stuff, but there's the day to day. How are kids moving around? How close are they to a campfire? There's so many unknowns that you are also discovering from the day to day perspective. So just that level of inherent risk, and risk is not a bad thing, right? Let's be clear. Risk is good. It's good to allow kids to do that. There's lots of science that backs that up, but from the camp counselor perspective, it just means that you need to be kind of on it in a bit of a different way. And that I would say would be kind of the first like hidden thing that you didn't know when you were jumping into being a camp counselor.
Yeah, for sure, right? Like, and not only that, but you're putting these things into practice, right? It may be your first time going through, like, what's the operating procedure to make sure something is being safe, right? Like, what are my fire safety rules? What are the codes that are in place to make sure that I'm not going to mess these things up? So, yeah, like Matt said, this is really it is the biggest one that I think a lot of staff don't think about, or maybe don't get the full perspective of
Mm,
when they get into this job. And
sure.
we've definitely said it on the show before, like, you're in charge of someone else's children, their most precious possession, part of them in person, like personified. And it's huge that you're taking care of these people. So understanding keeping those children safe is of the utmost importance. But there are a lot of other little things that a lot
Mhm,
of staff who apply and come out to their first camp job don't think about. Like personally, like I've had staff who have been at camp who just go like, I don't really like kids. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa! Like, why are you working at a summer camp? Like, it's all we do is work with kids. But they see that, like, they see camp, they see it, advertised to them through, really cute little social media videos of this amazing experience. You get to come into this place where there's water slides and zip lines and sailboats, and you're going to get to do all these things. And all of a sudden, you get here and you're like, I got to do all those things with a group of 10 kids every single time I want to go do it. This is not as much fun as I thought it was going to
mhm,
be. And that's one of those big things that I love to bring up is like, you gotta, you may not have to have kids as the number one priority of working at camp, which at the end of the day they are. They're your guests, they're the person you're serving. Like, I've met
mhm,
plenty of great staff members who are great program instructors, right? They're great at running high ropes, they're great
mhm,
at running sailing. They're not always the best like cabin counselors. And there's some camps out there that have a place for that type of person on camp who can, have a great time with kids when they're putting on that face, but maybe aren't the 24/7 camp counselor kind of position. And understand what's your role going to be when you're going to be taking care of those kids, because it's really tough to have that role model face on all the time. Not a lot of people really understand that. A lot of other worlds of customer service, you get to, sneak into a back room, you get to walk away, there's a longer break. These are all things that become a little bit more available to you. But if you're not a fan of working with kids and you're with them every minute of the day, it's tough. It's real tough, you guys. And that's
mhm,
something not a lot of people
mhm,
think about. The other big
mhm,
one is like I think people really think about like the beauty of the outdoors and being outside, and it's a really easy thing to market this like really pretty weather kind of a deal, sunshine. These are it's great imagery, like, and then people forget about, oh wait, there's bugs out there and the sun is hot and there's no air conditioning in the middle of a field, and they forget the average person nowadays is spending about 90 to 95% of their time in a climate controlled space. Think about it. Your classrooms, your car is even technically climate controlled, right? You are really only going outside if you are doing a special activity that day, or you are moving back and forth from one climate controlled space to another. And I have seen people who are miserable on that like 2 minute to 10-minute walk across campus to get from one spot of college to another. And it's just a miserable day. This is talking about nice weather too, you guys. I'm not even bringing up the rainy days, right? That are kind of awful, right? There's those things. And don't even get started on outdoor education when all of a sudden it gets cold and wet and there's snow coming in during the fall and the spring. Those of you who work winter programming as well, like, I mean, Matt and I are recording this during the winter. I had to do a tour today and I made sure I had like nice warm long johns because it's about 5 degrees outside today. And I was like, well, I'm not doing this tour if I don't have something warm on underneath. So understand you gotta either A, be prepared to work in these elements and be prepared to know you're outside, and you're not going to get this climate control all the time they get used to. A lot of people will adapt to it over time, but it's really important to note that. And I brought up bugs and stuff before. It's kind of the joke, but it is real funny seeing those counselors who come out to camp for the first time. They're not really outdoorsy people, and they are always asking the questions about, like, what do you do about bears? And you're like, yeah, we don't really have bears. Like, there's some camps that do have to really focus on those things, but dealing with wildlife and stuff, that's usually the least amount of your issue. But like, understanding you are going to be outdoors, you might see a raccoon trying to break into a trash can. If kids have snacks in the
Mhm.
cabin, there might be a small animal that gets in there and ruins your night, and they rip up all the kids' Oreos and stuff. But understand you're outside. So those are a couple of my points. I have a few more, but I don't want to talk the whole time. So Matt, do you want to take over a few of those things that maybe counselors aren't always ready for when they apply for this job?
Yes, I will do that in 1 second. But first, I just want to check both of ourselves for a second because we just spent the first, well, all of our, we just spent the first like 6 minutes of the podcast telling people why working at camp can really suck. And but I think it's important to be real about those things. And I want to remind folks that Oliver and I speak from the perspective of overnight camp directors. Oliver does day camp now, but when you say the word camp, Oliver and I think of like outside in the forest or in a field with bunks and cabins. But that's not the only form of camp. I mean, around the world in North America, there's lots of different styles of camp too. So, liking kids, camp is for kids generally. So that's one that's like, I don't know if you can really negotiate that one. Being a program staff, like you said, Oliver, can be a good fit for some people who might like teaching, but that 24-hour experience and day camp can be a good alternative. But there's also lots of STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics camps, and ones hosted on like college and university campuses where you are in a climate controlled environment. So just because you might not be an outdoors person, that's not a prerequisite to working at all camps. But if you're going to work at an overnight camp that is outside, again, we said this in the last episode, but make sure you do your research on the type of camp you're going to. And that will help give you a picture kind of what the day-to-day is like. And that's a great question to ask kind of in your interview. You can ask what's the pace of the day for the kids or something like that, because the type of camp that probably resonates with Oliver and my experience, the day is faster paced for sure. And breaks are limited a little, like you're not getting as much time to, like Oliver said, take 15 minutes and check your phone or something like that. That might be the experience, but it's often much faster paced and more physically demanding. And I've seen camps on college campuses that are physically demanding too. And it's literally, it could be like for you, physically demanding might be being on your feet for 6 out of 8 hours of the day of like your working day. That could be way more physically demanding if you're like a college student or like a high school student and your days are at your desk and then you're at home either like playing video games or doing something else where you're not standing and moving. So there's some physically demanding stuff that happens with that, again, in most of the roles at most camps we're talking about. So just making sure that you're ready for that. But it's also one of the biggest benefits. I have never been in better shape than when I was a camp staff every summer. And like my camp had good food. My camp, like, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't because I wasn't eating well. I was just burning so many calories running around and playing with the kids. And it is like the best form of exercise ever because it's all body weight exercise, right? The cardio is great. You're like really building those muscles if you're like belaying people, or maybe you get to rock climb a little bit. It is a very great environment to if you were like me, shed a lot of extra weight. I look back at some of my camp counselor pictures and I was like, I think there's like double of me now than there was when I was 17. And that's okay. I love myself now and I love myself then. But it is a perk and also something to be aware of.
I like it. No, and you make a great point. There's a lot of different camps that have different environments, and making sure you find the right one for you is really, really important. And that outside stuff. I also like to bring up a lot of camps, and right, some camps you have a specific responsibility when you're working at them, but a lot of camps you get 1,000 different responsibilities, right? You'll be taking on some things. And that comes up when you're working with kids, right? Kids have needs, whether they're hungry, whether they're tired, what you're doing to entertain them, what you're doing to manage their behavior. These are all different things that are going to require you to do weird jobs, things that you didn't think you were gonna have to do. Like you see the activities at camp and you're like, oh, I know I'm gonna take the kids fishing, right? That's something. But then all of a sudden you didn't realize you were also, putting them to bed, waking them up, making sure they brush their teeth. I'm trying to think of the thousand of tasks. Making sure they have everything in their bags, helping them get their shoes on the morning. Like these are all little things. You can't put them all on a job description. It's just labeled
Mhm.
as, taking care of kids or other duties is required. And in a lot of camps, like especially the ones that I worked at, we're nonprofit. So we also lean on our staff to do a lot of other small tasks around camp that sometimes add up to pretty big things, right? Like cleaning camp after all the kids
Mhm.
have left, right? That's a huge endeavor that the whole team works on afterwards to make sure that, everything's tidy. Some locations, like Matt brought up, sometimes college locations, they'll have a cleaning crew that kind of comes in and cleans the dorms or the areas the kids stay in afterwards. But a lot of the times when you're in like those cabins or even day camp at the end of the day, right? There's people who walk around camp, the staff members who do sweeps to make sure, there's no lost and found, and, all the program equipment was put back to where it needed to be. So just note that that's going to be one of those things that comes up as well. And with the thousand, little jobs that you didn't anticipate, I also say that there's a lot of times a lot of allowances that you kind of give into when you become a camp counselor as well, right? To be a part of the culture and everything that's going around. So, you may not be a big sing song person or like, but a lot of camps will do camp songs, right? So you kind of, put on a personality doing that, and it may not be your cup of tea. You don't pick the menu at a lot of camps. You're not choosing what you eat every day, right? Like it's being provided. So that freedom of choice on what your meal is gone, right? Like you might get to pick between salad bar, the main food group, or maybe like a dietary restriction. But it's sometimes people really struggle with either the restrictiveness of that, the repetitiveness, or the lack of choice. And just knowing as like a camp counselor, especially going to overnight camp, 3 meals of your day are decided for you. For a lot of us, like probably Matt and I, we probably kind of grew to love it because we're like, I don't got to think about cooking. I don't think about doing the dishes
Mm.
afterwards. Like, give me my chicken patty
Yeah.
sandwich and let's get rolling. But for those little, like, I'm a foodie and like I put up with it, but like I can definitely see, and especially when it came to staff who had dietary restrictions, where it was a restriction on top of a restriction. Like this is our option of the day, and this is the only thing we have for somebody who maybe vegetarian, vegan,
Yeah.
dairy free, whatever their restriction might have been. So those are the two things that I like also wanted to make sure we brought up. Is there's a lot of responsibilities going to camp counseling that's not always on that job description, and some people just label as other duties as required that I want to make sure you guys are aware of. And then the other thing is also, there are a lot of little allowances that you get to be a part of when you're part of this world. Sometimes are like a lot of fun and you enjoy them and you like to sing the songs, right? Or you like having a set bedtime and everyone just kind of goes to sleep at the same time at camp. But then there's also some things that like might be a little bit of a struggle for you, like that choice of food, or maybe, a little bit of that freedom. Like I know a lot of staff freak
Mhm.
out in overnight camp world when the camp director says like, oh yeah, no one leaves camp. You only leave camp during your time off. And people are like, hold on, is this like a prison? And
Mhm.
you're like, it's not a prison. It's just we need to make sure everyone's safe and everyone's taken care of. So everyone lives on camp. It's
Mhm.
part of our organization and way of life to how this operates. And
Mhm.
for some people, that's a real struggle
Yeah.
to wrap their head around.
A lot of this is how you look at it too, right? Like I think Oliver, you're doing a really good job of bringing forward the like you might not be expecting this, but it's also there's so much opportunity in these different ways of doing things too. Like the first one is I don't like doing dishes that much. And I don't mind doing camp dishes actually. Like I love put me in the dish pit. Ooh, I'm in a good place when I'm in there. But when I come back from camp and I haven't like had to cook or clean all summer. I'm a bit of a sad man when I have to do all that stuff myself. So there's trade offs. But another thing, Oliver, you said like there's various responsibilities that you do, and in the day to day, yes, that can look like putting on a camper's shoes. You weren't expecting to do that, but I don't know of many other workplaces that have such a like an opportunity to advance your skills or advance your position or level of responsibility like at camp.
Yeah.
And for sure, year to year, like sometimes people change. You could go from a counselor to a head staff within a couple of years, like a program staff or a senior program staff. There's so much room for advancement if you do well. But that can also happen like week over week, right? You have a really good 2 first weeks, or you take a big shining to leading drama or arts and crafts. The arts and crafts instructor gets sick, and hey, look at that. You can lead arts and crafts, and then you become the arts and craft instructor the next year. Like I have gained so many like various life skills from my time at camp. A lot of my like home maintenance knowledge that I use every day now. Even like I remember not knowing how to use like a screwdriver, like a drill, like that kind of like an impact driver. And then when I was on maintenance one year, I had to use an impact driver to screw in the platform tent. So I think I did 1,000 screws that year. And now I'm really good at it. And I don't make holes in the walls at my house. I almost never make holes in the walls. Sometimes I still do, but because I've gained those skills. And that's a good just reminder. There's lots of research out there about and resources that can help communicate the what you learn at camp. I'll put Project Real Job is a great resource that the American Camp Association has created, and we've had Kim on the podcast before, who's a big leader in that, and would encourage you just to check that out to understand more about the benefits of all of these hard things that Oliver and I are talking about too, because and we talk about it all over the other shows, but that advancement in a quick way and skill building is I don't know, I haven't seen it or heard of it happening anywhere else like at camp.
No, and if you kind of get to like, I'm definitely admitting I'm trying to be the negative Nancy, front loading, like, hey everybody, get ready for this. When you get to camp, I don't want you to, not get this. But this is also why, like, the things that I'm front loading for you as a listener and future camp counselor is because I want you to understand is like, yeah, these are things that are coming up, and there's kind of two different people when they greet it, and some people will greet this and be like, man, I don't want these responsibilities, or I don't want to be washing these dishes, right? But like those who come in and they do these things, and sometimes jobs suck, like we just kind of accept those parts. It's part of getting into the career in
Mhm.
the workforce. This is why we're talking about it, because a lot of people have, we talked about in part one, this might be your first job. But yeah, you are not working a desk job where your total number of responsibilities might be like five things. Say hello to the person that welcomes, you know, hand them a piece of paper that they got to fill out, accept that piece of paper back, put their information into the system, and then, let the doctor or whoever in the office know that their meeting is here to meet with them. I'm not knocking down those types of jobs. I'm just saying they got 5 to 10 responsibilities total, right? Which means that their area and their ability to grow in those positions is limited, right? There's not as much there because the actions of their daily responsibilities don't dictate that they're going to learn a new skill or have to overcome some type of obstacle. Whereas a counselor, you're met with this 10 times every hour, right? From trying to help a kid to type of career field, at least in our very maybe favorite opinion. Matt and I might be a little bit one-sided on the feeling about a camp job, but uh, but we see it, and I see the difference between somebody who's had a camp job and somebody who has not had a camp job, um, for who that person is in society, right? And it's a really great thing to be thinking about. So let's talk about you being in that job and some of the things that are kind of beyond the responsibilities of just keeping the kids safe. We've talked about it a little bit, but something that I really like to emphasize is competency. We've talked about all these different little jobs. The ability to do something well, quickly, efficiently is a really big struggle for a lot of people nowadays because we don't always have this many action based jobs going on. So, like Matt was talking about, there was a day he was required to get an impact drill and drill 1,000 screws, right? A lot of the times somebody might struggle with that. They don't know how to do it. They can't just pick it up and learn the skill quickly, and be competent at putting screws in a deck. That's one of those things that, as a counselor, I think understanding that there's some level of competency that your employer is going to expect out of you, that you can like pick up a pretty simple skill pretty quickly, and understand what's needed, right? And not need to have everything hashed out, directed, and followed. Because at the end of the day, you as a camp counselor are going to be managing some kids. You got to take care of these kids on your own. There's nobody who's right there watching you every second of the day, telling you how to do it, what to do. You got to be able to be decisive, make decisions. So there's competency that I know that I, as a camp director, am always looking for in my interviews. I'm asking questions to try and see, if you have some form of competency, right? Like, are you the person in the work group that does the work, or are you the one who sits there and watches everybody else get the job done? And the thing that I say about camp counselors is you got to be the person who's going to get the work done, because if you're sitting there with 10 kids and you're expecting 10 kids to figure out what you're going to do to that day, then you're not the leader of the group, you're the follower, and you're following the minds of about
Mhm.
10 year olds, and that's not going to end well for you or the children.
Good
So
luck.
competency is
Yeah.
a really big one that I think is, it's also, I think, bleeding to a lot of conversation that camp directors are having today. There's always been this complaint that, like, this younger generation can't cop to it, and Matt and I have kind of warred against that. We think that this, generation of counselors will be just fine. They're just their own type of counselor that we need to get used to. We also do have expectations that you're going to be able to do some of these things that we were able to do when we were counselors. So just note, like, yeah, we respect you. We're excited to have you here as counselors, but no, like, there are these things that we're going to expect you to be able to, pick up and do that maybe you haven't ever done before. And do you meet that with this, like, yeah, I can figure this out? Or do you meet this with the, nobody's ever asked me to do that before. Like, what are you talking about? What are you asking me to do right now? That mentality is part of competency. And that's what we're looking for. So that's my one big point to get started here. But Matt, what's something else that you're looking for these things that directors expect?
The idea of like competency is really interesting, right? Because we expect, I mean, like drilling 1,000 screws is a very hard skill. It's a very physical skill that you can learn and whatnot. And Oliver's right. We do expect that you can do the work that's in the job description, as much as the job description is actually descriptive about every little thing that you do. But I think for me, what's more important than competency, because I want people to get there, I want them to be competent. It's coachability, and I have seen some staff members who had very like little childcare experience. We hired them when I was a director at a camp in Canada. We hired staff at 16 years old, and like that's very young. I think for the industry, that's also pretty young. And I have heard camp directors be like, I will never hire somebody that hasn't had at least 2 years in college. And I think that you're missing out on a lot of great staff when you have that mindset. Responsibility is different and life skills are good. And I've seen the other side of it. But in the vast majority of the time, the 16 and 17-year olds that are first year counselors that I've worked with, the ones that are the most successful are the ones that are open to feedback and coaching, right? That they are confident enough that they can try it and they listen to the training that you're giving them. But if they make a mistake or if they're not sure about something, they're willing to get that feedback to get better. And so that they listen to it and they take action on it, but also just being receptive to getting feedback in the first place. And I will be the first to say that I wasn't, and I've gotten a lot better, but sometimes I still struggle with getting feedback because I really care about the work I do. So for if I write a newsletter and someone's like, "Hey, what the heck, or you missed that, or this could have been better," I might be like, "Oh, I," because I really care. I want to do something that's good. And so if you have that heart and you care and you get that feedback, don't be discouraged, because I mean, hopefully, I can't speak to the intention of every camp director out there, but in my opinion, every good camp director just wants to help you grow. They're not just there to make money off kids coming to camp. They're there to change lives, and they want to help you do that. So it might feel a little crappy to take some feedback, but it's okay, because it's all in the name of helping you get better and the kids have a better experience. And those things are both equally true, I think. And I think alongside of that is for someone to be enthusiastic about what they're doing. And what I mean by that is like there is nothing, there's a lot of things worse, but in my mind, I can't think of many things worse than someone who is like visibly angry or upset during the day at camp. And there's a great saying that our friend Joe Richards got from somebody else, but it was act enthusiastic and you will be enthusiastic. Right. And I don't need people to be like cheerleaders, front of the line, being over the top, because if everyone was like that, that would be a nightmare. That's not a place I would want to work or attend or direct. But you got to at least be able to go with the flow of things, have a positive outlook, and understand. I think above all of this, understand that you are the person leading by example for kids, right? You got to understand that like they will look to you for their energy. And usually they're going to take it one step lower than you. So that's why it helps to play it up a little bit. But, and beyond the kids' experience, it's your fellow staff too, right? Morale for a staff team that is doing something as hard as working at camp is everything. So I really appreciate from counselors when they are enthusiastic, but at least at a baseline that they're willing to move forward and do something, and not complain any more than is necessary, or complain to the point where they're affecting other people's experience. And I think that would be kind of my last point, is just try your best to consider how your actions are affecting others. And I know that that sounds like super trivial and super baseline, and like borderline kindergarten knowledge, but it's amazing to me. And I understand why it happens, but it's amazing to me how sometimes counselors, staff members, me, get in our own heads and like put those horse blinders on, where you can't see anything but what's right in front of you, and your experience is the only one that matters, right? Because the what you put out there is what affects the culture and the climate of camp. So understanding how you affect other people both positively and negatively, and acting with that knowledge, is, I think, something that is not intuitive necessarily, but is especially important when you're living and working and playing in community with so many people who are also like influenced by each other. So a staff member who, if I were to put all three of those things together, right? If someone's being a negative Nancy, and I give them feedback and they're willing to listen to that feedback and they understand it because they know that it affects other people, that's a great staff member, because they're willing to fix that behavior and then not be a negative Nancy going into the future. So if you can put all those three things together, honestly, I don't care about your competency, because I know that you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to competency with me, I think I'm already asking for you to be coachable. I think the thing that scares me sometimes is you've been in that spot where you're coaching, trying to get this person, and the competency just isn't there, right? Like they're just not picking up on whatever task it might be. And I as a camp director, I'm not
Mhm.
blaming you, right? Like I'm not saying like, hey, it's your fault you can't figure this out, but like I am saying that there is a certain level, and I think everyone has to understand this with all jobs, is there's a certain level of competency for any job that a director has to look for, right? Like if I'm coaching you on safety of children, and now we've had a couple issues where like, hey, you're not making the smartest decision at the smartest time, that's putting your competency in question, because you're not able to take the coaching to be coachable, right? So I think the two are connected, which is really important to me.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
love that you talked about enthusiasm and being able to put camper, put the excitement and everything into this job going forward. And I think one of the really tough spots that I say for that is that being of a role model, right? Like knowing you're in front of kids, you're being a role model all the time, not just so that when you're being a role model, they're not going to mimic you 100% in that moment, right? They're going to be trying to mimic you and be the role model that you're being. But I also think you're setting up not just camp, for that kid to be a better person if they ever become a counselor or something like that for the camp. You're also setting them up to like go out into the world and be a better person. I've always used camp as this example of like, hey, we're this like gravy roux that you're going to put back into the pot and then make your gravy with, that makes everything else delicious in the world, which is going back to Oliver cooking stories, but for cooking at camp. But I think that's really important, is your understanding that you as a role model at camp is really, really important, and your enthusiasm, your buy-in to camp directly connected to your desire to be a role model and your ability to act as one to all these kids. And there's some professional that comes with that, right? It's you know we got to be on time to lunch, you guys. We got to make sure that we're actually well dressed before we leave the cabin. We're prepared for the day. These are all things that are, professionalism, and and getting kids to understand that we're going to be a part of this, and you're role modeling that, but also you personally, if this is your first job, you're learning about those responsibilities you have to follow up on. If your boss asks you to get this camper report in, or make sure you're dressing professionally. Those are all little basics that you're learning here in one of your first jobs that are going to be reflective as you go up in your
Mhm.
career. So, and I think really coachable here is a lot of camps know this, and that they're teaching professionalism to a lot of young adults who are camp counselors every summer. And it might be one of those things that make us, like camp directors, scratch our heads every summer, being like, oh man, you think after 15 years these kids would be able to remember to wear their shirt, to check-in day. And then you got to be like, well, it's a different set of kids every year. It's a different set of counselors every year, all who are 17, all learning to learn this professionalism at the same point in their life. So we draw upon our patience, and we go, okay, we'll do our reminder like we do every summer. What this is, what the dress code is. This is what we're looking for. So just know, like, and if you're one of the
Mhm.
pack, right, you're one of those counselors who's on top of their professionalism, and not the one that we as camp directors have to be after, to be like, hey, you haven't washed your staff shirt all summer and we're in week 9. That thing probably smells really gross. Maybe you need to
You
go wash it.
you stink.
You stink.
Well, I
I
think
love that Matt
I think
laughed
it's
because he's
also
definitely
I think
knows that situation.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I probably stunk a little
You
bit.
were the
Stank?
9 week
Stunk? I was
stunk,
I was
stinks,
stinky.
stunk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not 9 weeks. That's a little nuts. I'm pretty sure there was like a how long can you go without showering challenge when I was a young staff member. Just silly. But I think beyond the silly side of it, like, and also I like to think that camp is a place that I can't speak for all camps out there. I think camps with really good leadership and really good culture are very intentional about their things like professionalism, because I feel like when at a lot of jobs, like professionalism is just seen to be like it's professionalism for the sake of professionalism, and no one really like defines why those things are important. But the thing that I didn't understand when I was a counselor was why things like being on time was so important, not just for the sake of like it's important to be on time, because I would agree that it is, but especially at camp so many things are timing dependent. And even if a camp is pretty loosey goosey, right, you can't start an all camp game until every cabin is there, right, because then a cabin's missing out on it. You could start a meal maybe a little bit late, so but why not just get kids and get yourself into the mindset where we should be on time? Because when we're not on time, here's it all comes back to it affects other people's experience, right? It affects the experience of the program director who worked really hard and they only have 45 minutes to run this game. And if they only have 30 minutes now, the game won't be as fun as it could have been. And then it really trickles down from there. So I think the cool thing about camp too is that at least the camps that I've worked at is people have been okay when I've asked why about something, like why is this a thing without any malice intent. I wasn't saying like I think this is wrong. If you ask why is it so important that we're on time? Oh, because this perspective that you might not have gotten. So just being open to the fact that things like professionalism or these weird cultural things that you'll certainly encounter working at camp have a reason behind them.
Yeah. And I think, while especially my voice today was a little bit like, hey, here are the things you got to prepare for. This might not be sweet cake the whole time, and you might struggle through some of these things. You might not like them. I think it's important to front load that to staff, right? Let them know, what they're going to be taking
Mhm.
on, especially if you've never had this job before, whether you've been coming to that camp for years and you're a CIT becoming a counselor finally, or you're a new staff member who's never walked on that property before. Maybe you're an international staff member who's never even seen camp before. Maybe you're just an 18-year
Yeah.
old who found that day camp job because you kind of thought you wanted to work with kids, and now look at you. You're sitting in the counselor seat and taking care of people. And these are some of those expectations I think everyone needs to know, and I think this is a way to relay them to you guys in a way that a lot of times Matt and I get to be really kind of nice about it, and we're talking about all the positives of camp, and this is a little bit of like, hey, make sure you guys are on time, make sure you wear your staff shirt, but we're not too mean. I hope not. And I think Matt and I both agree is with all these things, we go back to this about how much more you're going to get out of being a camp counselor than you would most other jobs. The things that come with it
Mhm.
come with so much more than you could expect. And then, you get to this end of the summer, or you even get 10 years down the line, and you go, oh, I learned how to use a screw gun at camp, or I learned how to unclog a toilet, or yeah, no, I'm pretty good raising my kid because I learned so much when I was working at camp. There's so many
Mhm.
positive things that come from this job, that all these little things we talked about are actually, these struggles are what make us such great people at the end of the day, because we've been able to handle these things and are equipped to take on more with our lives. So
Mm.
I hope everyone was able to listen for that last little bit there, so they know it's all worth it. But with that being said, we got to end today's show, and we end our show the same all the time, and that's with our EGGLE, an acronym for ever growing, ever learning. It's a trick, a tip, song, a game for counselors to use to be better every day. And I think Matt has a pretty beautiful one that he's going to show off today. So I'll let him go first.
Thanks, Oliver. So the my eggle, my thing that you can do that I think is just a fun thing. And not every camp is a musical camp. Some camps are like shouty song camps, and that's okay too. It's not the type of camp that I would work at. That's okay. Those ones are fine too. But for ones where like people are playing guitars and singing songs, I would encourage you, if you're not like an extremely musical person, to head to your local music store. Go to a local one. Don't go to one of the big box ones, but if a big box one is all you can do, go to a music store and pick up a couple harmonicas. And without getting to using my university music degree on you, there are harmonicas follow keys, and almost every like guitar song, like think about like Country Roads Take Me Home, or Wagon Wheel, or all those like classic ones, are usually, not always, in the keys of C, G, and D. And if you're not musical, I'm not going to try to explain keys to you. But what that means is that if you buy harmonicas, usually most harmonicas you'll get are in keys. So the one I'm holding for those of you on YouTube, my harmonica is in the key of G. And that means if somebody's playing a guitar song in the key of G, most anything that I play on the harmonica is going to sound good. It doesn't take a lot of skill to figure out as the chords change whether you like move to a different part of the harmonica, whether you suck or you blow on those parts. But if you a G harmonica, key of G works, D harmonica, key of D works, and a C harmonica, key of C works. So if you get those three, it'll probably cost you, I don't know, maybe like $40 to get three of them, or sometimes they come in like a little multi-pack, which is great. And they're super cheap, affordable. And if I'm playing guitar and someone busts out a harmonica and at least kind of knows what they're doing or is playing the right one, it's always going to make the song sound a little bit better. So I encourage you to do it. And there's like, I think you see it less and less in movies these days, but like sitting under a tree and just playing a harmonica in the shade, it's not a bad way to spend a couple minutes. So certainly encourage you to grab a harmonica.
Yeah. Music is a little bit rougher for me, because I am the shouty song camp, because I don't have any musical talent
Yeah,
whatsoever. So if I get a counselor who knows guitar, we'll take advantage of it. But it's like it's becoming fewer and far between for staff who can come out and play an instrument for you. So like, well, for those of you who are watching YouTube, when Matt was talking
totally.
about keys, I just held up my car keys. That's the closest I can get to a musical key. Uh, but I have a harmonica that's just kind of fallen on my lap through the camp year, so maybe I'll fiddle around with it and give it my best shot. For my Eggle,
There you go.
I'm giving out a game today that I really enjoy, because it's an easy one to play. For those of you who grocery shop, you might have seen a brown paper bag. A lot of places are getting rid of plastic now. If you take a look on YouTube, I got one here. Shout out to Dave's Fresh Supermarket. They're a really fantastic place. That's where I do all my grocery shopping. So you get one of these big bags, or you can even use a smaller, like a goodie bag, plastic bag. They're like maybe 12 inches tall. They're not that too big. This one's pretty big. And this is great for like younger kids because it makes it a lot easier. But the game is really simple. You get this big old bag, and it sits on the ground in front of you. And then all you need to do is bend over and pick up the bag using your mouth. But here's the trick: is you are only allowed to stand on one leg when you do this. So it's a balancing game. And as you go through, the rounds just get harder, once everyone's given it a try. And hopefully, not everyone's mouth is touching the same part of the bag. Maybe you just rip off the part of the bag that someone's mouth had previously touched, that like little chunk. But as the game goes on, if you want to make it a little harder, you just rip off a little bit of the bag every single time, and the bag gets a little shorter and it sits a little farther down on the ground, and you got to bend over a little bit more to get down to that bag, and it will get lower and lower and lower, and then you eliminate people as you go until finally there's only one person who can stand on one leg and get themselves low enough to get the bag into their mouth and get them up. And some people, if they have a really long tongue, sometimes they can get a tongue down there and like get it to stick to the bag and then get it up to their lips. It's a cool little trick sometimes people got. But it's a really fun game because everyone gets to kind of stand in a circle and watch each person. There's like this big anticipation whether they're not going to get it. It's like, oh, it's a lot of fun. So it's a good game when you got just that random thing sitting around. A lot of you guys will have those little food bags at camp, or they're super
Mhm.
cheap to get as well, so you can get some bags. And even just having one, it's it's a game I give to my counselors because maybe sometimes lunch goes a little bit long, and like you're waiting to get dismissed, and it's like a picnicky kind of day or something like that, and you just need something for the kids to play on the lawn. And so it's a nice little option, but it's a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed it, and the kids do too. So just make sure they're not like spitting on the bag, and then someone else is biting where the spit is. They just kind of rip that little piece off. A little germ phobia for some people, but it works well. So, if you enjoyed today's show, we'd be so grateful if you left us a review wherever you are listening to the podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like or don't like about the show, but it helps boost our rankings and helps more people discover the show. So, yeah, that's why we do it.
And please make sure that you are telling your friends about first class counselors. We want to make this as useful as possible. And the more we see people listening to the show, the more motivated Oliver and I are to keep this going every couple of weeks. It takes some good time to put this together, but we love doing it for you folks. And one of the things that can help you engage with the show is checking out our show notes, gocamp.pro/FCC. You'll find the links about how to get in touch with Oliver and I, and also check out all the other great podcasts happening with Go Camp Pro. There's some cool ones.
And remember, camp is camp, and camp is all good.
First Class Counselors is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, Summer Camp Leadership Training and Marketing Consultants. Thanks for listening, friends.
Hey Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we hope that whenever you share an idea that you learned from the Camp Hacker podcast, conference, Summer Camp Professionals group, or wherever else, that you're quick to give credit where credit is due. That way, we can all encourage more Camp Pros to share the tips and tricks that will make camp better.